Okay, you're listening to Live from the Heartland up here on the stage at the Heartland Cafe. I'm Michael James. It's the 4th of July in the year 2009, and we're going to move right along. We could take a musical break, but if I can get Danny Postel and Fereidoun, I hope I'm not killing this word, Fereidoun Dadrass up here, we're going to talk about Iran. Because there's a lot going on in Iran, and there's a lot of parallels to the American Revolution, and it is our day of revolution here on the 4th of July. Good morning to you, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Danny Postel, tell us who you are.
Well, I am a resident of Rogers Park. Some people would say I'm a resident of the Heartland Cafe. I used to spend so much time here, Mike, that back in the day before cell phones, if people couldn't find me at my apartment, they would call the Heartland to see if I was here.
Well, we're glad you're here today, and we always like seeing you because not only are you a great basketball player, but you've got good politics, and you have a wonderful book called Reading Legitimation Crisis in Tehran. And this book, we had you on the show a year or so ago, Dan,
Right.
when you had been over in Iran and you talked about it.
Right.
And so with all of this going on, I thought you would be an excellent guest, and you brought your partner, your pal here. Tell us your name so I get it correctly.
No, you said it correct.
Oh,
It's
good.
Fereidoun, and I'm a resident of Chicago. I'm an activist in a group that we call Solidarity with the People of Iran, and I'm glad that I've been a friend of Danny, and he's very active in this area.
Well, the first question I want to ask, because I know you were involved in Iran in leftist circles back in the 70s. Whatever happened to Bani Sadr? Because as I recall, back in the time when things were going on over there, he was sort of the progressive person that we heard about, and then he disappeared to France. Can you share any information about the Iranian Revolution and a little bit about how it's progressed or digressed?
Yes, Abul Hassan Bani said he lives in exile in France, and he was a progressive nationalist. He was the first president of Iran, but of course the reactionary Islamic fanatics, when Khomeini was at that time alive, they basically kicked him out, and he was able to escape. He had some nationalist democratic tendencies. If people like him and before him, Engineer Bazargan, who was the first prime minister, if we had figures like Bani Sadr and Bazargan, who basically believed in political liberalism and some sort of nationalism and independency, Iran would have had much better chance to improve economically and politically and socially. People would have had freedom to decide what to do. We see millions of people in the street in the last few weeks. People of Iran are very politically aware. They want to participate in their social destination, and unfortunately 32 years ago, all these freedom were taken away from them.
How would you describe what's going on in Iran today? To me, my sense was it didn't start out as an effort to topple the Islamic Republic, but it was more of a grassroots demand for civil rights, for a modern lifestyle. There's probably a lot that we don't understand. I think that people perhaps is the candidate, and I hope I don't butcher the name, but Musavi?
Yes.
Musavi, he kind of emerged as the key guy, but he wasn't necessarily out front and a real leader of a more progressive point of view. He kind of ran for office, and the people really took over on this thing. Fill us in, either one of you guys.
Yeah, Mir Hossein Mousavi, he was the first for the first 10 years, he was prime minister. He was a favorite of Ayatollah Khomeini. He was a leftist Islamicist who believed in some sort of mixed economy, but ideologically he was definitely, he probably to some extent now, he believes in Islamic Republic. But for 20 years, it was 1988 that he sort of lost his position, and then again recently, for 20 years he wasn't active. He's also an artist. But recently he was basically, I think, was promoted by the reformist faction because Khatami, and it was between Khatami and him, somehow figures around in the reformist faction, especially Hashemi Rafsanjani, who is a major figure in Iran. He's sort of a godfather of one of the godfathers of Islamic Republic, and he has some tendencies that we need to normalize. Iran needs to normalize its relation with the West.
Pragmatist, sometimes
he's
people
more
call him a
pragmatist.
conservative pragmatist.
Exactly. So Mir Hossein Mousavi sort of took this banner as a reformist, but he's not, in my opinion, a real reformist. And people basically backed him. I think in general, Iranian people, majority of people denied Islamic Republic. They want to see another system. They want to see secular republic, political freedom, and they want to have some democratic rights. But they resorted to this situation, and they supported Mousavi. Basically, is like the channel in order to express their indignation against the system. And this was one of the ways, one of the channels that they would have at least tried. They wanted to try to bring some changes.
Yeah, I would just add to that analysis, Michael, that what we've seen in the last 3 weeks, especially the first 2 weeks immediately following the presidential election in Iran, with the outpouring of first thousands, then tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in the streets of Iran, I really believe that wasn't only about the presidential election, and it certainly wasn't just about Mousavi, although you saw pictures and placards with Mousavi's visage over the streets. You saw the color green. It's been described as the green wave, even the green revolution. This is the color of Mousavi's presidential campaign. But I really believe that Mousavi and the perception that the election was stolen, as important as they were really flashpoints, trigger points for a much larger pent-up, maybe 30 years of frustration with lack of democratic liberties in Iran, with repression and authoritarianism, with specifically policies that severely repress labor organizations, the women's movement, human rights, and dissident intellectuals, and freedom of expression. That what you saw in the streets of Iran over those 2 weeks, and it wasn't just in Tehran, it was all over most of the major cities in Iran and even some of the smaller medium-sized cities. I think that what you saw was a kind of what some political theorists would call an empty signifier or a floating signifier, that Mousavi, the green wave, all of these ideas, even some of the expressions that were being used went back to the Islamic Republic, the 1979 revolution, the Allahu Akbar,
yes.
God is great. What was one of the original expressions of the 1979 revolution, and I think it was a very clever deployment. Doesn't mean that the people in the streets today are arguing for yet another Islamic revolution. What it means is that they're in a clever way using these tropes to kind of say to the leaders of the Islamic Republic, you people are full of hypocrisy, and we demand, it's kind of an imminent critique, we demand, you say that we're going to have elections and then you steal them, we demand an open society. I think what has begun as an imminent critique of the Islamic Republic could actually move well beyond it. I think this space has been opened up by virtue of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, and many of them being shot and injured. I think that has opened up possibly a new path for this movement that could go any number of directions.